The first thing I saw after the crash was a dangling wire sparking like it was auditioning for a dramatic death scene. And the second thing was the smoke drifting from the cracked console. I groaned, pushed myself upright, and muttered that my commander was definitely not getting a glowing performance review from me after this. The shuttle creaked as if agreeing. I shoved the emergency hatch open and stumbled into the forest of Velara 4, where everything glowed faintly, including the ground, the trees, and possibly my bruised ego. I checked my suit systems, most of which blinked red in a disapproving way, and decided I needed to find shelter or at least something that wouldn't immediately try to eat me. Naturally, that was when something tried to eat me. A low snarl rolled through the blue-lit underbrush, followed by chitin scraping against stone. I took one careful step back and whispered that maybe today was not my day, then raised my blaster. Before I could fire, a sharp voice snapped from somewhere to my left, telling me not to move unless I wanted to look even more pathetic. I turned, saw nothing, then saw movement in a branch above me. A silhouette perched lightly like she owned the forest. She dropped down gracefully, dusted off her tunic, and glared at me with silver eyes that sparkled in a way that suggested annoyance was her natural state. She looked almost human, except for the long ears that twitched like impatient punctuation. She marched past me, shoved my blaster a little higher, and informed me I was aiming at the wrong creature. I was about to argue, but the creature behind me hissed, and suddenly her advice seemed excellent. We fought side by side, though she mostly insulted my footwork while expertly kicking predators in the face. When the last of them bolted, she crossed her arms and informed me I owed her. I said thank you instead, which made her ears flick again, this time more like she was flustered than irritated. She tried to hide it by calling my crash landing noisy enough to wake the moon's core. I asked who she was, and she hesitated, glancing at the glowing tree line as if expecting shadows to listen. Then she sighed and said she was the daughter of Velara's queen. I stared, then said something extremely smooth like "oh." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd strained something. She explained she'd been traveling in disguise when her escort was attacked, and she'd been stranded here since. Everyone thought she was dead. I told her my mission was recon, and she said my mission was now not dying, preferably in a way that didn't embarrass her. We moved through the forest together, bioluminescent vines brushing our suits as if curious. She kept walking ahead, calling my pace slow, but I noticed she never let me fall too far behind. Every time her long ears twitched at a sound, she'd glance back, checking I was still there. At one point she asked if all humans were this clumsy. I said no, only the most charming ones. She looked away quickly, ears doing that flustered dip again. By nightfall we reached a ridge overlooking floating rock fields that hovered like lazy islands above a glowing ravine. I tried to scan for safe paths, but my device fizzed and died in my hand. She smirked. I told her I didn't need the scanner anyway, and then immediately tripped on a root. She caught my arm with a speed that surprised me, steadying me before I tumbled down the ridge. For a second her expression softened, no sarcasm, no sharpness. Then she let go quickly and muttered that humans were high maintenance. We crossed the floating stones carefully, her leaping with practiced ease while I tried not to look like someone scheduling his own funeral. She teased me every time I wobbled, but when a magnetic surge swept through the field and nearly pulled me over the edge, she grabbed my jacket and yanked me back with surprising strength. I thanked her again. She muttered that I was heavy. As we climbed into a sheltered alcove to rest, she admitted someone had engineered her disappearance to destabilize the queen. I asked if she trusted me. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said she trusted me more than most people she'd met in the last month, which was either a compliment or a threat. Her ears softened, though, so I guessed the former. I told her my mission had changed the moment I found her. She looked at me, long ears slowly lowering, and for the first time since we met there was no sarcasm, only relief. The moon hummed around us, and the night glowed gently as if holding its breath. We didn't speak again for a while, but the silence felt less like strangers and more like an alliance forming, shaky and strange, but real. The morning light on Velara 4 looked like spilled turquoise dye drifting across the trees, and when I pointed that out, she told me humans had a habit of romanticizing things right before they stepped in something poisonous. I checked my boots immediately, which only made her smirk as she climbed out of the alcove. Her long ears twitched while she scanned the forest below us, and when I asked what she heard, she said she wasn't sure yet, but that it was probably something inconvenient. That was when my wrist device crackled to life long enough to spit out a scrambled alert about approaching signatures before dying again with a sad metallic wheeze. She stared at the fried screen and said she hoped my species didn't use those as life support monitors. I told her only on special occasions. We descended the ridge slowly, following a narrow path between trunks shaped like spiraling helixes. She moved confidently, but every so often she glanced back to check if I was keeping up. I tried to look competent, but the ground had other plans and shifted beneath me like a lazy hover platform about to take a nap. She caught my elbow before I slipped and muttered something about humans being made of 90% bad decisions. I thanked her, and she pretended not to hear it. We stopped near a cluster of floating pollen orbs drifting like captive stars above the underbrush. I waved one away as it bumped my visor, only to watch it stick to my glove and pulse gently. She snorted and told me to stop petting alien spores. I said it was a mutual misunderstanding. She flicked the orb off my hand with one swift motion and told me to focus, because she finally recognized the sound she'd heard. Scanning drones. I ducked instinctively, which she said was pointless because your species crouches like overturned furniture. Still, she pulled me beneath a root arch as a sleek silver drone glided overhead, its beams sweeping the ground. I asked if it was one of the rebels. She shook her head, ears flattening briefly. It was human. That made the air feel heavier somehow. I tried to justify the presence of my own people, but she cut me off sharply, saying that anyone hunting her, human or alien, was someone neither of us wanted to meet right now. We waited until the drone disappeared into the glowing haze, then slipped deeper into the forest. She walked faster than before, tension hidden beneath her steady tone. The path opened onto a valley lined with luminous pools, each bubbling softly with biothermic energy. I tried dipping a finger near one and immediately yanked it back when the surface flashed bright green. She raised a brow and asked if humans always touched dangerous things to confirm they were dangerous. I said yes. It was cultural. She almost smiled. As we continued, she explained more about her disappearance. Her escort ship had been sabotaged by someone within the Queen's Council, someone patient enough to stage the perfect accident. She survived only because she'd fled the wreck before the fuel cells detonated. She said all this in a steady voice, but the way her ears folded inward for a moment gave away the fear she hid beneath sarcasm. I listened quietly, then told her she wasn't alone anymore. She scoffed but didn't argue. By midday, we reached the edge of the valley where the ground transitioned into scattered platforms of stone hovering over a mist-filled gorge. The stones moved unpredictably, drifting closer then drifting apart like indecisive thoughts. She leapt to the first one gracefully. I followed with all the elegance of a refrigerator shoved off a truck. She winced when I landed, and I said that was just my warm-up jump. The second jump nearly dropped me into the mist, but she grabbed my suit collar and hauled me onto the next stone with more strength than she looked like she should have. Her ears pinned back in irritation as she told me to stop worrying her. I started to tell her I hadn't noticed she cared, but she quickly jumped ahead before I could finish. When we finally reached solid ground again, we found signs of recent activity, footprints, scorch marks, and a discarded energy cell still warm. She crouched beside it, eyes narrowing. Whoever was tracking her was close, too close. I suggested we circle west toward higher terrain. She hesitated, then agreed, saying we'd stand a better chance of spotting pursuit from above. As we climbed the slope, the sky flickered with magnetic interference, threads of light weaving between clouds. She said the storm would disrupt scanners for a short window, giving us a chance to move unseen. I nodded and followed her into the swirling air. At the summit, we finally paused. She sat beside me on a ridge stone, ears relaxing for the first time that day. I told her I admired her composure. She glanced at me, surprised, then said her composure was 90% pretending and 10% hoping I wouldn't trip into danger again. I told her she underestimated my talent for chaos. She laughed, soft, brief but real, and in the shimmering stormlight it felt like the first moment of calm we'd shared. But the peace broke when a distant echo rolled through the valley below, metallic, deliberate, unmistakably the sound of approaching units. She stood quickly, ears sharp. I rose beside her. Our pursuers had found the trail again. And staying together was no longer just a choice. It was survival. The ruins rose from the mist like the ribs of some ancient metallic beast, half buried in the moon's soil and humming with leftover reactor heat. She studied the broken archways with narrowed eyes, her long ears twitching at every echo, and I felt the tension in her posture even before she spoke. This was where her escort ship had been lured, where the sabotage began, where everything in her life had cracked open. I stepped beside her and said softly that we'd finish this together. She didn't look at me, but her ears tilted in a way that said she heard every word. We moved through the shattered entrance, our footsteps crunching over glass-like fragments. Bioluminescent dust floated through the air like drifting thoughts. She guided us with memories she clearly wished she didn't have, and I followed close behind, blaster ready. My wrist device buzzed again, barely alive, but this time it displayed multiple signatures approaching fast. Not drones, not beasts, people. I told her we needed to move faster. She said she already was, and that humans should really evolve longer legs if they wanted to keep up with royalty. I tried to argue that my legs were perfectly fine, then nearly tripped over a warped pipe. She caught my arm, sighed dramatically, and told me to try using my feet for walking instead of interpretive flailing. Ahead, the corridor opened into a wide chamber glowing with unstable reactor vents. Streams of faint blue plasma curled upward like translucent vines. She slowed, breathing shallowly. I knew why. The last time she'd stood here, she'd run for her life. I touched her shoulder and said we didn't have to do this alone. She looked at my hand, then at me, and something in her expression eased. Just a little. A figure stepped from the shadows behind the reactor core, slender, armored, calm in the way only someone absolutely certain of their power could be. Her ears stiffened as she recognized him. Counselor Vastir, the Queen's most trusted advisor, now revealed as her betrayer. He greeted her like an old friend returning from a long trip. She raised her chin and told him she would have preferred remaining lost forever over seeing his face again. He laughed, a smooth, poisonous sound, and explained that her disappearance was supposed to spark a political crisis, not drag on this long. He glanced at me and said humans were notoriously inconvenient. Before I could respond with something dignified, like a heroic threat or clever insult, she stepped in front of me. She told Vastir that whatever scheme he'd started ended here. He replied by activating a containment field that trapped us within a ring of crackling light. I tried disabling it, but my device fizzed like it disapproved of my optimism. Vastir walked closer, promising her an easy surrender if she came quietly. She laughed sharply and told him she'd rather stick her head into an ion thruster. I whispered that she should consider at least a slightly less fatal option. She whispered back that she was improvising. Her ears flicked, a signal she wanted me ready. When Vastir stepped within arm's reach, she lunged, not to attack him but to yank me sideways just as the reactor vent behind us erupted. The burst destabilized the containment ring long enough for us to roll free. Vastir shouted and fired his plasma gauntlet. The bolt hit the ground beside my hand, scorching a perfect, "stop touching the floor" message into the stone. We sprinted deeper into the chamber, ducking between vents as plasma fog thickened around us. She told me there was a manual override near the upper platform that could shut down the reactor's unstable cycle if we could reach it before Vastir. I told her I admired her optimism. She said she didn't. She admired my tendency to volunteer myself as bait. We climbed the support beams fast, skidding on metal slick with condensation. Below us, Vastir fired again, the blast slicing through a beam where my foot had been half a second ago. She grabbed my wrist, hauled me up, and muttered that if I fell now, she'd resurrect me just to scold me. We reached the platform. I rushed toward the control panel, trying to decipher alien schematics with the confidence of someone who absolutely could not decipher alien schematics. She shoved me aside gently and activated the sequence with swift, practiced gestures. The vents began to cool, the chamber stabilized. Vastir cursed and charged up his gauntlet for a final blast. She stepped in front of me again, and I stepped in front of her. Vastir hesitated, only a second but enough. I fired, hitting the gauntlet and overloading it. The shockwave knocked him backward into a collapsing vent column, where the containment locks snapped shut around him. His cry echoed as the chamber sealed him inside a stasis field he himself had installed years ago. Silence followed, long, heavy, unbelievably welcome. She exhaled slowly, her ears relaxing. I turned to her, expecting a sarcastic comment about my terrible aim or chaotic timing, but instead she just looked at me, really looked at me, and said I'd changed since we met. I told her she had too. Her ears dipped, soft and warm, and she whispered that she was glad I'd crashed onto her moon. When we finally emerged into the daylight, the Queen's retrieval ships descended, not as hunters but as rescuers. She stood tall when they greeted her, but her hand brushed mine briefly, deliberately, as if reminding me this wasn't the end. Later, when the Queen thanked me formally, she interrupted to insist I wasn't just a soldier. He was her partner. The Queen raised an eyebrow in the way mothers do when they suspect something interesting is happening. As for me, I realized the mission that began as a routine assignment had become something that rewired the entire course of my life. I wasn't returning to my old world unchanged. I wasn't sure I wanted to. She walked beside me, long ears catching the wind, and said we had a lot to discuss about the future, preferably somewhere that didn't involve reactors trying to explode under us. I agreed wholeheartedly, and for the first time since the crash, the path ahead felt clear.